Hey yo everybody, Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider, where we learn about motorcycles as we ride. On today's show, it's Aprilia's Tuono V4, which has evolved a little bit over the years, but at its core is a slightly more naked, slightly more upright version of Aprilia's RSV4 Superbike. And for 2021, the base model is offered at a price of $16,000. So we've got the better part of 200 horsepower and optional saddlebags. This should be a pretty good daily ride. All right. Okay, kids. Aprilia Tuono V4. So I did say this is the base model. There's Tuono V4 now and the Tuono factory. The factory's got some full zoot suspension, lower handlebar, racy paint. We'll talk a little bit more about how they differ later on. But as I said, this is the base model, which now comes with a larger windshield than the factory model by 18%, I'm told. So hopefully that statistic helps you. Yeah, as far as braking equipment, you've got basically the largest brake discs that come on any motorcycle on a showroom floor, 330 millimeters with big stonking Brembo calipers, braided lines, adjustable lever, radial pull lever, all the full zoot stuff that you want and you expect to see on an Italian super naked. What you're probably less likely to see on an Italian super naked is saddlebags. These are optional. Price is TBD. We'll talk a little bit more about them later, but they're very weird. Agreed? Look at that. There's like a big one on the left and a tiny one on the right, and for some reason Aprilia mounted the right one up here and then this one down here. I don't know if anyone's sure why Aprilia did that, but that's what it did. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about bags later, but so you know, the optional saddlebags are on there. And yeah, I think it's just about time to fire it up, right? Big old TFT screen here, as is tradition on high-spec motorcycles in this era. And basically the same old exhaust note that we've always loved so much. Whoa. Grumble, grumble. Yeah. All right, so 1,077 cc's of V4 saddlebags, slightly taller windscreen. I gotta say, I'm excited about this. Very excited. Let's get to it, shall we? Lots of specs to sling at you. I don't always have claimed horsepower numbers because brands are sometimes not into that these days, but with a high performance bike like this, it's common for the company to want to talk about it, and Aprilia definitely wants to talk about it. 175 horsepower on tap according to Aprilia, and 89 foot-pounds of torque from this 1,077 cc V4 that I mentioned before. So this is not the engine from the RSV4 1100. The V4 as it has evolved for the Tuono remains the same, which is that 1077 cc mill instead of the 1100 that the RSV4 got. While we're at a stoplight, we can talk about seat height. 32.5 inches. You can see I got a pretty friendly bend in my knee. Again, 6'2", so I'm a little bit taller than the average bear, but it's surprisingly approachable considering how performance oriented it is and how big the bike is in general. And on the topic of big, we should talk about weight, which is claimed at 461 pounds. I measured it with a full tank and the saddlebags on at 488 pounds. So I don't have a definitive measured weight for you, except that I can tell you that Aprilia says the saddlebags and racks weigh about 13 pounds. So if you take the 13 pounds there, subtract it from the 488 pounds that I measured on our scales, you got 475 pounds. Because there's a little bit of arithmetic there, I'm not going to state that in the specs that are listed in the description of this video, but if you purchase a base Tuono V4 without saddlebags and put it on a scale with a full tank, I think you're going to see 475 pounds. And now we can talk about riding position as we peel into this off-ramp. We got a clean run at this off-ramp, on-ramp situation. Almost a clean run. Ugh, so good. Anyway, riding position. Stay focused, Zach. The riding position on a Tuono V4 is aggressive, certainly, especially when it comes to seat-to-peg distance, in other words, legroom, which is a little tight, if we're honest, but it is a performance bike. The reach to the handlebars has always been quite reasonable and widely agreed upon to be very good. And, most people who've tried a Tuono would say. But in 2021, the V4 and factory editions of the Tuono separate a little bit. And one of the big things is the handlebar height. So on this V4 base model with the slightly larger windscreen, the handlebar height is up 20 millimeters. So that's about 3/4 of an inch that the handlebar is higher on this bike. And that makes for quite a comfortable riding position. The only thing that really hints at its performance roots is the legroom, which if you're over 6 feet, you might find a little tight on a day trip. All right, now we're going freeway speeds, just about. And as with most high performance engines in top gear at 70, 75 miles an hour, it's just absolutely loping along. Just sort of, yeah, 5,000 RPM, so calm. A little bit of a pulse and vibration through the handlebar and through the foot pegs, but it's just in general, it's just such a lazy pace for an engine like this. Yeah, it feels like it could do it all day. And Aprilia has gone out of its way to make sure that people know that they can do it all day, like the windscreen, which, you know, it's not a super huge windscreen, obviously, but it does take air off of my torso. Like I sort of get hit, I can feel air on the top of my shoulders and on my collarbones, but you know, my sternum is in fairly quiet air, my stomach is all out of the air, so you know, it's not a ton of wind protection, but it's something. It's more than Tuonos have had in the past, and they'll definitely help a road trip on a road like this be more comfortable. And one of the ways you can tell Aprilia is encouraging this bike to be used for some sort of travel, obviously the optional saddlebags, but check out the mode, the ride mode that I'm in. I'm in Tour. Tour on a Tuono? What? Yeah. Obviously the Tuono has been the best way to experience Aprilia's superbike power on a road trip for years and years now, but now the company's actually leaning into it, which I think is kind of cool. And on the topic of touring, as of a few years ago, Aprilia Tuono's got cruise control. So if you hold this little switch over here down, it starts blinking at you. And if I tap it again, it sets the cruise at 65, and then I can rock it forward to add speed, rock it back to, and then I think you can, let me see, if you like pull in the clutch, I'm gonna tap the rear brake and cancel the cruise. There's one thing I don't like about it is that it blinks. You see that little light going off? So like when you have the cruise on but not engaged, it's sort of like, hey, you got cruise on, hey, don't forget to reset it, hey. And I sort of think, yeah, I know, I'm just doing something else right now, relax, instead of blinking at me. Let's see if we can resume it. It doesn't actually say resume on the thing, but if I tap up, nope, that doesn't work. What if I tap down? Nope, that doesn't work either. Okay, so there's no set and resume in sort of a classic back and forth sense. You just have to rock it to the side there and set it, and then you can adjust it with the toggle. Cool. We learned about this motorcycle as we rode it, just like we promised in the beginning. All right. One question I did see a lot of on Instagram was questions about range and fuel mileage and that kind of thing, because the Tuono is famously bad for that kind of thing. So right now we're cruising 66 miles an hour. It says we're getting 45 miles to the gallon. And to be fair to it, for this tank, it says we've gotten 32 miles to the gallon. Yeah, I won't beat around the bush anymore than I already have. I got 35 miles to the gallon basically on this bike. And that's probably one of the reasons why, because it's fun to twist the stick. But yeah, I did find the trip computer for average fuel over the course of a tank would say low 40s, and then I'd get about mid 30s. So it's quite optimistic in my experience. But in general, mid 30s is sort of what you'd expect, I think, for this bike. And if you multiply that by 4.9 gallons of gas, it's 170, something like that. So the point is, you should be able to go 150 miles if you're cruising on back roads or even just like slogging down the freeway. I think, and that's not bad. Not great, not bad. Last but not least, mirrors, obviously. Gotta talk about mirrors. And they're not bad on the Tuono, actually, for such a high performance bike. Again, the saddlebags, the windshield, stuff like that. It suggests that Aprilia cares a little bit about, you know, the sort of practicality of the bike. And the mirrors suggest that as well. Pretty smooth. Same shape as always, basically. No real complaints here. All right. Come down to neighborhood speed here through this intersection, and voila, we're in an urban environment. And this is, oh yeah, we'll learn how the old Tuono does here. Not its favorite territory, if we're honest. 0 mile an hour stop sign challenge number 1. Ooh, got it. Interesting. Wasn't necessarily expecting that, because the controls on the Tuono are all quite good. The throttle response is decent. Clutch feel is simple. Cable clutch is quite good. And the fueling is good. And yeah, you feel very connected to the power plant, to the clutch, to all that stuff. But the truth is, a bike like this doesn't really enjoy going slow. And yeah, around town, it's fine. But it's not stretching its legs in the way that it wants to. That was a very poor effort. First one was right on the money. Second one was terrible. So I don't know. Stop sign challenge. I guess we'll just have to see how it goes. Nope. Couldn't do that one either. Maybe I'm just psyching myself out. The one thing around town, which I don't want to forget to mention here, we'll talk about it later as well if we're lucky, but steering sweep, which is just terrible. Which shouldn't affect my stop sign challenge, though. I should be able to get through these. Here we go. Nope. Fudge that one up too. I don't know. That first one, I was thinking such good things about it. All right, Zack, focus. Come on, here we go. Yeah, okay. A little better that time. And now that we're coming up to this stoplight, I can show you this this steering sweep, which is pretty miserable. It's just like, also there's a whole bunch of space. Can you see the space down between the fork tube and the frame? There's like a half an inch anyway, maybe more. It seems like it would be useful. Sort of an artifact of it being a high performance bike, I guess, or it's something that that Aprilia wanted to maintain or something. But anyway, speaking of high performance, delicious. However, I will say, I found first gear to be not as sort of vicious and impressive as I remembered. I asked Aprilia about that, and Aprilia said, yes, that's true. The Tuono is limited in first and second gear, basically so that it's not too scary. Which is probably the right thing to do with 175 horsepower claimed on tap. However, I can't help but be disappointed. Hey, Corvette guy, he's gonna like this. He's gonna like this bike. We'll give him a little rev. Hopefully that didn't tick him off. If anyone was going to agree with me on this, it would be Corvette guy. I want to be able to experience the engine as it is. I want to be able to at least turn that off. Give me all the beans in first gear if I paid $16,000 for this bike, right? Yeah, it's a little body English. That's what helps the stop sign challenge. So yeah, it's limited in first and second gears. I don't agree with it personally, but I understand why Aprilia did that. So, passenger accommodations on the Tuono V4. Another area where Aprilia has leaned into the more practical side of the bike. On the factory version of the Tuono, the foot pegs are sort of where you'd expect them to be, extremely high for the passenger, that is, and not particularly comfortable. On this bike, they are lower, they are farther forward, and they are wider. And I don't remember all the numbers off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but I will do my level best to add them to the first ride article on this bike which is linked in the description of this video. You can go find specs like that in that piece. The overall rating for the comfort for the passenger is surprisingly good, but still not great. It's still not a ton of legroom, still sit way up high above the rider, but there is a nice grab handle that runs around the back of the seat that you may have noticed. The seat's pretty wide, pretty accommodating, and Aprilia did go out of its way to add you know, some legroom for the person back there. I don't think it's something that passengers are going to be blown away by, to be honest, but an effort was made, and I can appreciate that. All right, as we approach the twisty roads section of our test loop, I'm going to tap this button down here on the right side of the handlebar, and you'll see the upper part of the dash switch from Tour to Sport, and then when I get off the gas, it settles into that mode. It's one of two modes within the road settings on the bike, aside from the race settings, which is a different can of worms, that is preset. So Sport and Tour are completely preset with engine management, traction control, wheelie control, launch control, all the mumbo jumbo that you'd expect to find. And then there's a user mode, which we'll experiment with a little bit later, that allows for tuning of all those parameters as well. A small break in traffic here. We can lean on the tires. You know, this bike, this kind of thing, it is just so good. What you really want is a twisty road that's not in suburbia, obviously, but that's not on my way to work, unfortunately. But yeah, the handling of this bike is terrific. It's just very planted and confidence inspiring, and it sort of eggs you on in a healthy way. It wants you to lean over, encourages it. It's nice, and it's not even the fancy suspension, right? The factory has the full Zoot suspension, and this is, you know, this is adjustable and you know, a nice suspension in the world of motorcycling. But for an Italian hyper naked, it's not that spicy. I think it's quite good. It's a reason in my mind that, you know, we rode that Tracer 9 that has sort of basic suspension that's now electronically adjustable, but it handcuffs you a little bit with the electronic adjustment. And to me, I ride a bike like this and I think, yeah, this is just basic good suspension. It's not good for a world superbike racer, but for me, for you, it's fine. It's good. It's really, really quite good. It's compliant, does everything right. The engine on the Tuono is still definitely the, you know, the crown jewel of the bike. And I've said this before about bikes, you know, the engine's really what kind of holds down the glory of a truly exciting and engaging motorcycle, and this one is one of the best. It's so good. I will admit I have some questions about it getting better. I don't know that it has. You know, there are some cool features that the bike has received, like cruise control, and this cruise control switch, by the way, can be toggled to either be cruise or you can adjust wheelie control on the fly with it, just like you can adjust traction control on the fly here with these paddles, plus minus paddles here. So watch traction control on the dash, you can turn it down, you can turn it up while you ride, which is cool. But then again, the engine has, you know, it's stunted in first and second gear, and it's Euro 5 emissions, and it is getting bogged down a little bit by all the things. Luckily for Aprilia, and for you, if you have a chance to ride one or buy one, it has so much character that it's not diluted enough to ruin it at all. By any stretch of the imagination. All right, here we go. You hear wheelie control working there? Yeah. I'll have to turn that off at some point, am I right? All right, approaching red light, we can talk about brakes and the quick shifter. Boom, boom. You stab these brakes. ABS engaging. Oh, and the four-way blinkers went off. That's a function that the bike has in the IMU. If it senses sort of panic braking, like very, very hard braking, the back of the bike lights up and lets people know that you're slowing down extra hard. It's, you know, it's a little piece of technology that I like, actually. It's always a double-edged sword with this stuff, right? Because the reason that the Tuono is so excellent and always has been so good is the fact that it's just raw and sort of pure and powerful in a way that few other machines can match. So when you sprinkle a bunch of electronics over it, you could argue that it detracts from it. But you know, then you get stuff like the panic braking thing and the nifty suites of electronics, and you know, adjusting stuff on the fly, and what else? Cruise control. You know, I mean, those are things that I like. So I don't know. It's always a bit of a push-pull. Trundling along surface streets here. Another thing that I could address would be engine heat, which is another thing that people are always worried about with a high-performance bike, which is, you know, rightly, because that is a thing. There's a problem sometimes. I haven't found the Tuono to be too bad, and I rode it in some pretty warm weather. To be honest with you, I was sweating my butt off at the end of that intro there, standing in the sun. The air is kind of cool today, so it's not too bad once you're moving. My right foot is the first thing that I start to feel heat on at slow speed or in traffic or something. But in general, I don't notice a lot of engine heat, thankfully, unless you're sitting at a traffic light idling on a hot day for many minutes in a row, then you might notice it. But even then, I didn't find it to be too oppressive, to be honest. Little back-end preview there. Rear ABS off in user mode, obviously. Oof, that was clean. Speaking of clean, we're about to get dirty on the old off-road shortcut sort of thing. I suppose you got a campsite, your saddlebags, you got a campsite down a road, you got to go down in your Tuono. Whew, the traction control is getting me there. Oh, it's kind of freaking out. It doesn't like it very much. So what happens when we turn it down to TC1? It still doesn't really like it. Not off-road traction control, predictably. One thing I will say about the traction control levels, there are 8 levels, I believe. And when I turned it up to 7 or 8 on a twisty road and really ham-fisted it, it would sort of catch me and it would be cautious. Oh, more jumps. Whoa. All right, we'll have to remember that for next time. But when I turned it down to maybe 4 or 5, even right in the middle of the range, I could really hammer on the bike, and it would let the engine use itself in a really satisfying way. Here we go, jump on the Tuono. Oh gosh, oh man. Like I said, nice compliant suspension. A little more air than I wanted to catch, but in general, not bad. So yeah, just to finish that point on the traction control. Yeah, it's a surprisingly lenient and performance oriented, even on level 4 or 5 of traction control, which I really appreciated. I find that'll, or I think that'll probably make it a little bit easier to use over time. All right, let's see if the Tuono will wheelie. What do you guys think? Think we can do it? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Lots of woolies if you want it. A little bit harder to wheelie than some bikes though. You know, certainly than an MT10, even like a Yamaha MT-07. Well, it's like in some ways wheelie's easier than a Tuono does, and part of that is the performance background of the motorcycle. It has a lot of mechanical grip, has a new swing arm, I believe, actually for 2021, which I failed to mention in the intro. All this is to say, this bike is not designed to do wheelies. It's designed to drive forward, to go as fast as possible, and that means that the front wheel doesn't want to come up necessarily, but it will because there's so much horsepower on tap. Good Lord, you can really get yourself in trouble on this thing. Oh boy. Oh boy, that was a good one. Juicy. All right, we've arrived at the office. Time for a U-turn test, which, ooh, let me see. Okay, this is good. We got 3 parking spaces between the trailer and that little transit connect there. So we're gonna go as slow as we can. We're gonna go full lock, feet up. Oh, can we make it 3 parking spaces? Oh yeah, just barely. So what was that, 2 7/8 or something? Yeah, U-turns on this bike are miserable. I mean, fine from a control perspective, but the steering sweep is just terrible. But, you know, hopefully you don't want to turn around too much. Hopefully you're just going to go forward. Because forward is the best way to go on a Tuono. There really is a genuine slice of the Superbike paddock. It's pretty frickin' cool. All right, everybody, for goodness sake, time for some Instagram questions. So we'll start with Dean Jones 461, who says, MT10 touring or this? And yeah, that's a good question. What I'd like to bring back around is that point that I made about performance versus fun. And the MT10 is it's more comfortable than this bike. The range is going to be comparable but worse on an MT10. And it's basically just like a really exciting, boisterous, fun bike. This is a very engaging, boisterous kind of track weapon. You know, an MT10 is going to wheelie a lot easier. It's just going to be a little bit kind of lazier about how it takes on the world, which I think is great. It just doesn't have the performance edge by any means that the Tuono does. If it was going to be a one and only bike, I'd have to get a Tuono because I want to be able to go to the track and really tear it up. And the MT10 doesn't do that quite as well. But if you're not a super high performance rider, I think you're going to find an MT10 maybe more fun than this bike just because it's not quite as hard-edged and scary. Moving on to the next question. Speaking of hard-edged and scary, the next question is from It's Me Garcia, who asks, is the factory worth it over this? I say this question because of the phrasing. Worth it. What do we think there? Like, is it worth it like in lap times? Probably. It's going to be faster on a racetrack for sure. But like worth it for Joe Schmo, for you or me on a racetrack, or in any really performance riding situation? I don't think so. Ari went on the launch for this bike, and his takeaway from the whole thing was he would take the low handlebar risers from the factory and just put it on this bike and call it good. Just get in a slightly more aggressive riding position because he felt like that was the biggest thing with the factory. He said this nice suspension is nice, but this suspension is fine. And unless you're like an expert level club racer, I don't think it's going to be that big a difference. Hopefully that helps. Some more comparisons here. J.U. Atkins 2000 asks, touring question, new multi S1000 XR or the touring version of the Tuono? Good question. Interesting. The Tuono has sort of always been a hard-edged naked bike that is now slightly more relaxed. And then the S1000 XR sort of like, it seems like an ADV-styled sport touring bike, but it's actually super, super hard-edged and vicious. So those bikes are pretty comparable. New multi, if you're talking about the Multistrada V4, that is like a big sort of like cruising kind of bike compared to an S1000 XR and the Tuono V4. So for outright touring, if you're just going to travel around, even though the range sucks, I'd get a Multi V4. You're going to be much more comfortable. It's got great features and options. If you want to go to a track day now and again, the Tuono or the XR is a better op. Next question, one more comparison question from Cior Martinez, who asks, this or the Ducati Supersport S? I know they are two different categories for displacement, price, and power, but feel like the philosophy behind them is comparable. True. And yeah, I think the Supersport's a great bike and I really love it. And I guess if I was going to choose between them, I'd get this one just because the power plant, the engine on this bike is so good and so exciting. But if you were sort of like, I want a Tuono, but I don't want that much horsepower, then you could get a Tuono 660, I suppose. That'd be a good bet too. But a Ducati Supersport S would be a decent place to go. Like, you'd have fun at a track day, but riding it day to day, not so bad. And the last question is from Isla Y, who asks, how much can you fit in those bags? So I said we're going to talk a little bit more about the bags later on. Well, it is later on and we're going to talk about it. So in this bag, I have left an extra layer. This is like a thermal layer jacket. And you can see that takes up most of the right saddlebag. This saddlebag is going to be for snacks, an extra pair of gloves, maps maybe, if you have paper maps anymore. And you're going to want to make sure you don't mind them getting a little bit warm, obviously, because it's just above the pipe and the black. So when they sit in the sun, that'll happen. And then this bag, as you can see on this side, is quite a bit bigger. I mean, in here you could fit some sizable things. They have these little liners in them. They are water resistant. There is a cover that you can put over them that makes them waterproof. And again, this whole assembly with all this metal, not that, that's the foot peg, these braces and this sort of like steel trellis situation, and the bags themselves, Aprilia says 13 pounds worth of stuff. So they're useful, but kind of weird. And I'd probably just use a tail bag anyway. Than that, I don't know. Because when you take the bags off, you have to bolt them off, and then there's like all this stuff hanging off the bottom, so I don't know. All right, that's it for Instagram questions. Thank you so much, as usual, for submitting them all. I really appreciate it. Let's put this bad sucker on the Daily Rider leaderboard, and I can let you go. All right.
All right, everybody. Here we are again inside RevZilla West and the Daily Rider leaderboard. I even got a special shirt on today. See that? Aspen, California. For sale now at RevZilla.com in case you're interested in a Dumb and Dumber shirt. We're pretty proud of that adventure, as you might imagine. So the company was nice enough to make some shirts. Anyway, Daily Rider leaderboard, friendly reminder of what's at the top there. You got your R1250 GS Multistrada Versus. That's a pretty steady podium these days. First naked bike, MT-07, Street Triple R, Street Fighter V4. And then down the bottom there, you get some older stuff, some slower stuff, and some lower stuff. Here's the thing with the Tuono V4, right? It is more practical than before. Taller windscreen, better passenger accommodations, that kind of thing. But really what it's still good at is going fast, making that noise that we love so much, and having that sort of crackle and fizz and excitement and engagement that we as motorcyclists really, really appreciate. For me, I think the Tuono is going to be pretty high up there because I get so much enjoyment out of riding that bike. It's so good. The range is crummy and it's not as comfortable as an ATV bike, for example. But again, side by side, sitting next to another bike in my garage, a lot of these bikes, I'm going to lean toward the Tuono day to day just because it's pretty comfortable and it's pretty good and it's so exciting and fun to ride. The comparison everyone was asking for, Ducati Street Fighter V4 S. Is the Tuono a better daily rider? Yes, short answer, it is. The Street Fighter is harder edged and makes more horsepower, but like, come on. It's not like the Tuono is slow and it's a little bit more comfortable and the range is slightly better. So yeah, Tuono is better than that. Suzuki V-Strom 1050 XT. Is it better for getting to work than a Tuono? Probably. Is it gonna be lower on the board than the Tuono? Yes, it is, because that bike's kind of boring, and the Tuono is the opposite of boring. MT-07, also good wheelies, also has some safety aids, also fun to ride. Not as fun as a Tuono, but it's better than a Tuono day to day. It's easier, it's more approachable. God, this is hard. All right, so here it is. This is it. MT-07 Africa Twin versus 1000 Street Triple. We're gonna be in here somewhere. Versus 1000 Africa Twin. Those are great bikes. Definitely better touring bikes. Definitely more comfortable. But the Tuono is better. I'm going here. We're going right here. Underneath the Yamaha MT-07. Whew. How about that, everybody? I don't know if I saw that coming, to be honest. That's a little bit of an upset. That MT-07 does great wheelies though, and you don't have to be going 75 miles an hour to do them, which I appreciate. That's a great finish. That's a really good finish. I'm surprised the MT-07 beat it out, but hey, what can I say? It's the magnet stuck to the board. It's over. We did it, everybody. That was a really fun daily ride, hence the little fireball. Another bike on the board, which is really starting to fill up, and that's it. I pitched my t-shirt, showed you a bike, rode to work. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. You know the drill. Yeah, I hope to see you next time on Daily Ride, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. See ya.
Yeah, boy. Traffic. All these ponies and nowhere to gallop. You know what I mean? Couple biker dudes. Shouldn't normally make eye contact with those fellas.